The images are disturbing and heartbreaking, all captured on nighttime surveillance video. A smuggler dangling a young girl over the border fence, dropping her 14 feet to the ground, then tossing over another child before abandoning them in the desert and running away.
How did these two little girls survive that drop?
It is a miracle.
The girls are sisters from Ecuador, toddlers just 3 and 5 years old, rescued by Border Patrol. El Paso Border Patrol Chief Gloria Chavez made sure they are uninjured.
They're just happy little girls. The 5-year-old acts like the responsible one, obviously, and is caring for the 3-year-old.
They're part of that record migrant surge at the border after President Biden allowed unaccompanied children to stay in the U.S. There are now more than 18,000 children in U.S. custody, more than 5,000 still held by Border Patrol, waiting to be moved to Health and Human Services care. Earlier this week, the administration allowing one news crew into this overcrowded Border Patrol facility in Texas. The children packed shoulder to shoulder in the middle of a pandemic. None of them get COVID tests unless they show symptoms, most brought over by smugglers like in that video.
It breaks my heart to see these 3-year-old, 5-year-old children just being treated like a commodity by these criminal organizations on the border.
The girls had a phone number with them in a backpack. Border Patrol has reached their mother in New York and hopes they will be reunited.
On the crisis at the border, and that heartbreaking video of a migrant boy picked up by Border Patrol in Texas, see him right there, after being abandoned to fend for himself. Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman has the latest. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, good morning, George. We don't yet know that little boy's name, but we are learning a lot more about his story. He's from Nicaragua and apparently crossed into the U.S. with a group of migrants. But when he woke up near that barren field that morning, they were gone and he was alone.
This morning, this lost 10-year-old boy's terror putting a face to the more than 19,000 migrant children and teens now in federal custody. You can see his fear, asking the Border Patrol agent, "Can you help me?" and hear the hurt in his voice. "They left me behind," the Nicaraguan boy sobs to the agent who found him wandering near a barren field near the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas. Through the tears, the boy says he wasn't with his mom or dad. He repeats, "I came with a migrant group and they left me behind."
¿Vienes con tu mamá o tu papá?
Nadie. Yo venía en un grupo que venía de entrega con usted y al final me dejaron botado y venía aquí a pedir auxilio.
The boy telling the agent he was scared of getting robbed or kidnapped.
Tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo.
Te pueden robar.
The Border Patrol telling us the boy was taken to this child detention center in Donna, Texas, which has recently been so overcrowded, children were forced to take turns sleeping on the floor. From the air, we saw the massive expansion of that facility to accommodate the many thousands of additional migrant children and teens expected to cross into the U.S. this year. And increasingly among those minors are tender-aged children brought over by smugglers like these two, a 3- and 5-year-old, dropped over the wall near El Paso last week. Thankfully, they were okay.
Now, I'm told that that boy is in the process of being transferred to a shelter for migrant children ahead of being united with family members here in the U.S. Now, across the Southwest, there are so many migrant children in federal custody that facilities like this, the Long Beach Convention Center, are now being converted into temporary shelters. Michael.
Definitely overwhelming, Matt. Thank you so much.
All of that, but let's begin with Alex Hogan. She is live at the border in Mission, Texas. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Dana. Good morning, Bill. Just over this levee, there is a processing site where many of these migrants who surrender to Border Patrol are processed, and we've seen some of them already here this morning, all of them sharing harrowing stories of what they've experienced in this journey, just like that little boy. Again, let's take a listen.
No sé dónde está. ¿Te dejaron solo?
Pues claro, me dejaron botado.
So this child just walks up to border agents sobbing. Again, he was traveling in a group without his family. He explains they left him behind while heading to the border, and crying, he asks the agents, where else would he go if he doesn't go with them? This is a sad new milestone that we're seeing. 19,000 children are in U.S. custody. Each of them, just like that little boy, made it all the way to the border. Well, one boy last week, he was traveling with his father. The two swam across the Rio Grande River, but the father drowned, helping his son get across. And that is just another one of the tragic stories of these children arriving here in the U.S. unaccompanied. More delegations are announcing their trips here to the border to see this humanitarian challenge for themselves. An envoy to the Biden administration is set to return from his trip to the Northern Triangle tomorrow. Here's a live look at the border wall in Mission, Texas. Now, many environmental activists say they are glad this never should have been built, while law enforcement here say that the halted progress really creates problems of its own.
That means that now you're patrolling, or at least trying to patrol and enforce areas that had once been secure and now are wide open. And then you couple that with the unaccompanied children, the family units, and you can't forget that every day Border Patrol agents are still encountering criminal aliens.
Now, this is an example of one of those sections of the wall that is not finished. Now, a lot of divided opinions on what to do, but many people around this area just want questions about, will it get finished? Will it remain like this? Questions they're hoping they will get from the government. Bill, Dana.
Thank you, Alex.
Want to bring in former acting ICE Director Tom Homan, also a Fox News contributor. Tom, good morning to you. I want to show you the number that Dana and I were referring to a moment ago. Projected total unaccompanied minors crossing the border in this year, 184,000. Tom, you saw the video. What do you think when you see that?
Well, look, thank God the little boy's safe with the Border Patrol. Look, you know, that's why I fight so hard, Bill. And people always ask me, why do you get so emotional on TV and why do you yell at Congress when I testify? They haven't seen what I've seen in my 35 years. I've held many dying children. I found many dead children. I've talked to women who were raped over 20 times. A third of every woman that comes across, that puts themselves with the criminal cartels, a third of them make that trip, get sexually assaulted. I've done investigations where when a migrant couldn't pay a smuggling fee, he was tortured. They actually called his family up, tortured him while his family was on the phone to make him pay the smuggling fee. And they killed him if they didn't. So look, illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. You know, females get raped. I talked to a 9-year-old who was raped. I did a lot of investigation. I put a lot of alien smugglers and human traffickers in prison. My only regret, I couldn't put them all in prison. These cartels are ruthless. But the promises this Biden administration, the promises they have made about you can enter the country illegally, you won't be detained, you won't be deported, we're going to give you amnesty and free health care. You put yourself in a position where you're going to put the most vulnerable people, put themselves in harm's way to get here because they think they're going to be released. These policies of the Biden administration are not inhumane. They're not humane as they said it was. The only humanity I see on the border is what this video of these Border Patrol agents saving lives, over 4,000 lives saved last year. And I add this, you can hate President Trump or you can like him. I don't care. But you can't argue when illegal immigration was down 70–80% under his administration, how many women didn't get raped? How many children didn't die? How many millions of dollars do the cartels not make every day? So I think this administration, the Biden administration, needs to get back to some of these policies because these policies that Trump administration had saved lives.
Tom, there's another aspect of all of this, in addition to the children and the victims of illegal immigration and what the cartels are doing to them. And that is the possibility that when they say 100,000 getaways in a possible year could include terrorists. 2 from Yemen have been caught already. Don't know how many have not been caught. And Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader for the House, he said this last night on Hannity.
The border agents, they told me that they had caught people on the terrorist watch list. When I brought that up at the press conference, my Democratic colleagues weren't shocked by it. You know what they did? They called me a liar until we brought forth the answers. And it should not come as a surprise that the Democrats are troubled by this. They are trying to distract from this disaster because they created it.
When there is chaos in a situation, terrorists like to take advantage of it. They also like to take advantage during a transition from one administration to the next. Is that what's happening here?
Absolutely. Great question. That's what makes this humanitarian crisis a national security crisis. Look, the Border Patrol's already said 40% of their manpower is no longer on the line. So if you're somebody in the world who wants to come here and do us harm and blow something up, it's almost impossible to get a plane ticket anymore because all the database checks are done when people are trying to get a plane ticket from the United States. It's almost impossible to get a visa anymore because all the database checks they do, DOD databases, and they look for any derogatory information, and the visa security program protects the issuance of a visa to somebody who has derogatory information, maybe related or known as suspected terrorists. So if you really want to come to the country, what's the best way to come here? You're going to come the same way 20 million others did, to the southwest border, when 40% of the border patrol is no longer on the line. The border is vulnerable. So like you said, Danny, you said it correctly. How many got through that we didn't catch? That's what scares me. Because there's over 1,000 gotaways every day. Border Patrol has over 1,000 gotaways based on sensor traffic they can't respond to, or drone traffic or camera traffic, over 1,000 gotaways. So if you want to come to this country to do us harm, now, the border is vulnerable right now because of the situation created by the Biden administration.
Thanks, Tom, for your input today. Tom Homan, a lot more to cover here. If you're on the no-fly list, you know it, right? If you're a terrorist, because you probably tried to get on a plane already, and yet you, as we have seen, you can walk across the border if you can get there. Thank you, Tom. One final note here on this, Dana. There's talk now that they could plug the holes, quote unquote, in some of the border wall that was unfinished. Seems like a pretty good idea. You see some of that video from the aerial pictures there. Those gaps they're vulnerable right now.
I feel like if the Biden administration is thinking about reversing course on a bad decision, we should help them do it.
A shocking discovery for an area couple. 5 unaccompanied migrant children abandoned on their property.
They found the children over the weekend at a ranch off Highway 277 between Eagle Pass and Del Rio. The ages of the 5 girls range from 7 years old to just 11 months. Vanessa Croy with the KENS 5 border team is in Quemando with the rancher's story they're sharing only with KENS 5.
Well, from where I'm standing, you can see Mexico on the other side of the river here. This ranch includes 5 miles along the U.S.-Mexico border. The Hobbs told me in the last few months they've seen migrant traffic pick up, including a group of 50 that crossed just a few weeks ago. But they said what they found over the weekend was the worst thing they'd ever seen.
No one with these children dumped out on the side of the river here on our farm.
With frustration in her voice.
If this doesn't make you mad and want you to take to the streets, I don't know what will.
Katie Hobbs recorded the situation unfolding right in front of her.
And then we found them laying over here. They were crying. They were scared. They didn't know where their parents were.
Sunday morning, Hobbs said her husband discovered 5 migrant children.
My husband called me on Mother's Day morning about 8:30 and sent me a picture of 5 little girls laying in the dirt on a dirty blanket down here on the river.
Alone and abandoned on their farm.
He thought one of them was dead.
Border Patrol officials said the 5 girls were from Honduras and Guatemala. The oldest child was 7 years old. The youngest, just 11 months.
Babies. These are babies.
Hobbs said her husband finished his evening rounds at 6 the night before and didn't find them until early the next morning.
They were here all night alone. Jimmy said they were weeping and crying when he found them. And they stopped crying when they realized they were going to get some help.
The other 2 people you see in the video are farm employees trying to communicate with the girls in Spanish.
They couldn't say anything about their parents or where they were.
Hobbs said in the decades they've lived on the ranch, they've had occasional crossings, but nothing like they've seen in the last few months. And she said she fears it will only get worse.
Our summers are about to get brutally, brutally hot, and it is going to be a killing field if something is not done. Look at this.
In Maverick County with the KENS 5 border team, I'm Vanessa Croy.
Border Patrol agents transported the children to the holding facility in Uvalde until they're transferred into the custody of Health and Human Services. Officials said the girls were all in good health and did not need medical treatment.
Let's turn to another major issue that the Biden administration is ignoring, and that's what's happening at the border. Fox News capturing exclusive video of migrants nearly drowning trying to cross into Texas. Griff Jenkins joins us live in Washington for more. Griff, we seem to think this is a big deal, but not many others do.
It is a big deal. Brian, Ainsley, and Lawrence, good morning. The border is on fire. It is in crisis. And the video we're about to show you is far too common of an occurrence in the Rio Grande Valley. Migrants caught in life-threatening situations attempting to cross the river. Fox News' Sarah Carter captured this all on camera. Watch.
They're drowning. They're drowning. They're drowning.
Our agents there rushed down to the river to help them. Meanwhile, at the other end of the 2,000-mile-long border, a remarkable helicopter rescue. Agents from CBP's Air and Marine Operations Unit out of Yuma, Arizona, spot a woman being assaulted just 200 yards south of the fence on the Mexican side near Calexico, California. Director of Air Operations, Jim Schutzler, described it.
We look for any kind of action that may be going on either side of the border, and saw what he looked like a man and a woman struggling with each other. As he got closer, it was apparent that the man was trying to overpower the woman, and in his words, looked like she was actively being raped.
The assailant fled south when agents activated loudspeakers and helped catch him in coordination with the Mexican authorities. As the woman, shot in the head as well, ran north where the agents had landed and provided medical assistance through the fence until a Mexican ambulance arrived. This after that heart-wrenching video we saw of an abandoned toddler crying out near El Paso. All of this as another bipartisan group of lawmakers visits the border yesterday, including a tour of the Donna, Texas facility. It comes, guys, as HHS said yesterday, it will not shut down any facilities holding children in Texas, despite an order from Governor Greg Abbott. Brian, Ainsley, Lawrence?
Yeah, it's about jurisdiction, I guess. Thanks, Griff.
There seems to be no end in sight to the crisis at the southern border. Another disturbing video shows a small child being abandoned. This time, it's a 5-year-old boy seen pleading with smugglers not to leave him after being dumped just steps from the Texas border. It's awful. Texas is responding to the crisis by declaring a disaster at our southern border. Governor Greg Abbott says Biden's policies are emboldening drug cartels and human traffickers. But the president doesn't seem to be listening. The White House just officially ended the Remain in Mexico policy that the last administration put in place. So, Jesse, I'm asking a question perfectly tailored for you. Why do Democrats hate migrant children?
Oh, how long do we have, Greg? You know who shot that video? The French press.
Really?
So again, that's foreigners doing the jobs that Americans won't do. I think there's more to the story than we see here, because they're saying, oh, yeah, the little kid's going to meet up with her parents who already crossed. Why wouldn't the parents just bring the kid across intact? Because Biden's letting family units come, and then he's getting them bus tickets to Tennessee. That doesn't make sense. This, I think, was the French press intercepting a child sex trafficking drop-off. That's my impression. But good thing, Greg, that Kamala Harris is going to address the root causes. Mm-hmm. She doesn't realize you can address root causes and the crisis at the same time. Say you get lung cancer. You could wait 5 years and get a class action lawsuit together and sue Big Tobacco, or you could stop smoking it and do chemo. You could just do both at the same time. Biden and Harris don't understand you can do both. Now she's going to go down to Guatemala, and she's going to address root causes. One of them, she says, is food insecurity. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any of these migrants crossing, Greg? They do not look emaciated to me. She also says that one of the drivers of this migration is climate. I looked at the weather in Guatemala City. It's 76 degrees. You know what the weather is in El Paso, Texas? It's 82. It's hotter here than it is down there. So they want to talk about root causes. The root cause is in the White House, not the Northern Triangle, because when you get rid of the Remain in Mexico, you get rid of the wall and you bring back catch and release, that's what explodes the migration. I think, honestly, Biden has anger issues. I think he's taking out his anger on the red states. He's flooding Texas with these illegals, with these drugs, and these gang members. He's canceling energy projects in Oklahoma and Alaska. He's boycotting Georgia. He's shipping illegals to Tennessee. I mean, Donald Trump loved the blue states. You know, he was constantly rescuing factories from Michigan and sending ventilators to New York, and even saved the dairy farmers with tariffs in Vermont. Vermont, yes. A state that will never vote for Donald Trump. So, I mean, Joe Biden, can he lift a finger for Texas? Lift a finger, Joe.
You know, Harold, you just experienced your first, I would call that fruit bouquet. You know, when you get a fruit, where there's all these different parts that Jesse creates, and you don't know which one you're supposed to attack first. That's his genius. But
overwhelming force.
Overwhelming. There's like 16 things you could respond to, Harold, if you wish.
Look, I'd say a couple of things. She's going to go down, and she's going to address one part of it. And Jesse's
to Guatemala,
right. To Guatemala, right.
Fair.
So the last time there was a serious investment, I'll come and try to, which part of the trio I want to go, not go after, but try to react a little bit. The last time we got serious about trying to stabilize our hemisphere in this regard, it was under President Kennedy. He passed the Alliance for Progress. It was a very targeted relief package. Now, drugs have been coming across the border even when President Trump was there. We had a serious challenge, and I wouldn't blame President Trump's border policy for that. Democrats have to get more serious about what happens with people coming across the border, and we have to put more people down there to protect our border. And if that means having a debate about who's watching kids and who's not watching kids, perhaps we should have that, compartmentalize that. You think about what we spend in the Middle East to stabilize there. We spend billions a year. We spend pennies on the dollar to stabilize our own hemisphere. I don't want to keep having this political argument. And we can go back and forth. Democrats gain a little bit from it every 2 years. Republicans sometimes gain from it. When I was in Congress, George W. Bush was trying to advance some sort of way to stabilize down there, and he talked about an immigration plan. In fact, the last comprehensive immigration plan we had, you know who put it forward? President Reagan. Now, you name me a CEO of a company that could take 40 years to say, we're going to revisit a very controversial, serious problem we have within the company. And I'll show you a CEO who doesn't work there any longer. We allow our presidents and our Congress year after year after year after year to allow this silly conversation. Not that anything you said was silly, but it's silly that we have the conversation repeatedly, that it's a recurring one. We should be able to do both. Address tobacco companies and address the cancer. To borrow, I think that was part of the fruits as well.
It's hard to
We've
follow.
got to figure out how we do that.
You know, Sandra, to Harold's point, it does feel, I think this is a cynical take on from me, which is a surprise. When the Democrats are not in power, immigration is their cudgel. And then when the Republicans are not in power, it's theirs. So it's a game in which every 4 years, the teams just switch sides. That's all they do. They switch sides. It becomes an outrage for one side, and then the other side has to defend themselves. And this never changes.
And then watching the White House press briefing today, Jen Psaki's barely even asked about this. Hold this video of this 5-year-old boy up for the White House to respond to. I mean, he's 5 years old, carrying a teddy bear. His words, "Don't leave me. Where are you going? No, 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 don't leave." The woman who left him there, to your point, Jesse, spoke to the Associated Foreign Press. She says the parents are already here. The boy's coming in from Mexico. A reminder that Kamala Harris, and by the way, there's reports today that she apparently panicked after Joe Biden gave her this immigration assignment, might give us a clue as why she hasn't visited the border, hasn't held a press conference about this. There's a disaster declaration by the Texas governor about what's happening there. Resources are running dry. These towns are seeing crime on the rise. And a little boy like that, why is that not being addressed? And why is the messaging from this White House not changing? When Psaki was asked about this in the press briefing room to her today, she said, migrating to the border, this is our message, puts you and others at risk. There is no message that they're putting out there that our borders are closed and there's a right way to enter the country. Why? Why does Kamala Harris not attack the situation? And why is her own party not holding her up to the responsibility?
She's learning to hide. It worked for Joe, right? So she's just out of sight, out of mind. Dagan, I have a theory. Would you like to hear it?
Of course.
All right. I think that many defenders of the status quo are guilty of distance privilege. They're far enough away from the problem for it not to matter. So you have these declarations of disaster. Those are the people like that. And then everybody else is like, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's because you're not there. We can actually, in New York City, we can reap the benefits of the cheap labor at our restaurants. But we never have to deal with the problems down there.
Well, the chattering classes in the elite here in New York and in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., they look at Texas and go, those, stupid redneck rubes. They don't really care what happens in red states, to Jesse's point. And I just want to know, how many screaming kids is it going to take for Biden and co. to give a damn?
Amen.
Because all they're concerned about is the words and the messaging, right? Just a few months ago, we were arguing over, it's not a crisis or chaos, it's a challenge. Well, they can't wordsmith crying children. They can't massage the message of a 5-year-old screaming to make it palatable to the compliant media or their base. What Biden and company have done is they broke intentionally something that was fixed to bring in people across the border who are potentially future voters. And at the same time, they've simultaneously created an opportunity for people, for human traffickers and drug traffickers, to profit off of human suffering and tragedy. So if you look at the children being terrorized at the border, but this is, in Biden's world, this is just the political price to pay for their policy. This is just collateral damage. The person who dumped that kid, or the people who dumped that kid at the border, they don't care about his well-being, just like the people in the White House.
Yeah, but that child still will always have connections to whoever they hired, and that's going to be used against that kid when he's in the United States whenever they want anything, because they know the kid has relatives there. They need him to do some work, some work, drug work, whatever. He's got to do it, or else somebody's going to get hurt.